Hi, I'm Laura, and welcome to This Full Mind, a podcast devoted to learning from inspiring leaders in self-development, mindfulness, mental health, and whatever topic I'm passionate about each week. Maybe, like me, your mind can feel a little bit full sometimes. I hope that each episode will give us the opportunity to slow down, take a breath, and connect with another person's story. Thank you for listening. I'm so grateful you're here. Hi everyone, and welcome to episode 3 of This Full Mind. I'm so grateful to have you here, and I'm still really on a high from recording this episode with Nkechi. You are in for a real treat. I had such an amazing time. I got to spend some time with Nkechi having lunch, and then we recorded the episode. And it was just so wonderful getting to know her more and really hearing about her journey. I was really grateful to hear so many different parts of her life and things that she's passionate about, from neuroscience, which you're going to hear all about, to dance, to, of course, mindfulness, which is how I actually met Nkechi. I went to one of her mindfulness meditation classes at the assembly, and I'd seen her at the assembly and been to a few of her classes and thought that she was awesome. But one day I went to class and I was the only person there, which is very rare, and Nkechi was kind enough to do the class for me, and we had just a wonderful one-on-one experience and was able to chat afterwards together. So I knew from then that I wanted to have an opportunity to work more with her and spend more time with her, and it just felt so serendipitous to finally get that opportunity to do that. As we were having lunch, we were just talking about things that were kind of lighting us up at the moment, and we both just had so many things in common, from the work that we're both doing with Lacey Phillips' platform, The Pathway, which is part of her brand To Be Magnetic, which is basically manifestation, all about manifestation, how you can reprogram your limiting beliefs to make yourself more magnetic, to call in your desires. And yeah, we had so much in common around that work, and some challenges and some kind of amazing, beautiful things that have arisen from that work. Just a bunch of other things too, people we'd met, things that we'd been to, classes we'd been to. So yeah, I'm just so grateful for Nkechi and the work she's doing, and I'm really excited to see what 2020 brings for her, because I know that she has so many amazing ideas and things in the works. So I really hope you enjoy this episode. Pretty much after I finished up recording with Nkechi last Friday, I came down with a really bad cold, and I wanted to talk about it for a few minutes. I've been posting a little bit about it on my Instagram, which is at mindfullylaura, and the reason I want to talk about it is because I really experienced some low mood and almost kind of a bit of depression during this time when I had a really bad cold, and it was just so interesting for me to experience that and trying to be mindful as I experienced it, going from this amazing high, feeling so connected with Nkechi, to the next day being in bed all day and feeling very hopeless and just low, pessimistic, empty. And I'm really very lucky that I have such a supportive boyfriend, because in those situations I do tend to isolate myself. So I didn't really reach out to friends. I didn't really reach out to my family. I kind of just hunkered down and just experienced it, and he was super supportive in giving me what I needed. One of the things that I asked him to do was to cover up the mirror in my bathroom, in our bathroom, I should say. And that's because, which I talk about a little bit on my Instagram, and I mentioned, I think in last week's episode with Ryan, I do suffer from some obsessive kind of compulsive behavior around my skin and worrying about my skin and not feeling like I guess, not feeling like my skin is normal, feeling like I need to change my skin and fix my skin. And I'm sure it's something that I'll talk about as the podcast continues, because it is something that's really real for me. But I was able to see from past experiences and from kind of things that were triggering me as I started getting ill, that it was going to be a tough few days for my self-esteem and for my sense of self-worth. So I asked him to cover the mirror so that when I was spending all this time in the house, not being able to go anywhere, that I wasn't pulled into that kind of obsessive compulsive spiral of worrying about my skin and picking my skin, which is something that I really struggle with, which is, you know, a really recognized disorder now, skin picking disorder or dermatillomania. So yeah, I wanted to share that because that's been really real for me. Today was the first time that I was able to leave the house in 4 days, and you know, I'm almost back to feeling well. I'm just taking it easy, but I know that it's flu and cold season, and when I've shared this before, I think it's something that some others experience, especially that feeling of low mood when we're unwell. I think it is quite normal. And so just encouraging anyone listening that it is okay to experience that and talk about that and express to those around you if there's something that you need that could help you work through it. It was an awesome experience for me to be able to be so upfront with my boyfriend to say, okay, this is what I need, and that's definitely something new and something that I've been working on. And yeah, it really helped me. And yes, it was a tough few days, but I got through it, and I'm really grateful now to be coming up towards Thanksgiving and feeling well and thankful for everything I have in my life. So I'm going to leave you now and hand over to the episode with Nkechi. Check out in the show notes how to get in touch with Nkechi. I really recommend her Instagram, and we've also linked her meditations that are available for free on SoundCloud, which is awesome. I can't wait to listen to them myself. And yeah, would love to hear your feedback on this episode. Please do get in touch on my Instagram at mindfullylaura, and look forward to another episode. If you know of anyone who you think would be awesome to have on the podcast, I've got a really, I think, amazing lineup of people who I find inspirational, but I'm really excited at the prospect of meeting new people. So as you're listening, and if anyone comes to mind for you, please do get in touch with me and send me a message or a comment. Who would you like to hear on the podcast? Okay, enough from me. So I will speak to you soon. Hi, Nkechi.
Hi.
So for everyone listening, I'm here with Nkechi Njaka, and I'm so honoured and privileged to be here with you. So thank you for joining us on This Full Mind.
Thank you so much. It is such a pleasure and honour to be here. Thank you for having me.
Of course. So to get us started, something that I've been doing with all of my guests is starting with 3 mindful breaths. Are you up for it?
Totally.
Okay. So for anyone listening as well, we're just going to settle in wherever we are, just taking 3 deep breaths. You don't need to change anything. You don't need to sit in any certain way. Just bring your awareness to your breath and breathe in through your nose and out through your mouth. So breathing in together, in through the nose and out through the mouth. Breathing in through the nose and out through the mouth. One more time, breathing in through the nose and out through the mouth. Feeling a little more grounded now.
Me too.
Yeah, so I've been lucky enough to be in some of your mindfulness and meditation classes at the Assembly in San Francisco, and I know you teach and facilitate a bunch all over the city. But first of all, would love to hear from you. Actually, before we get into that,
I would love to hear 2 words that just summarize how you're feeling right now.
Yeah, I am arriving into this space with so much gratitude. I know that's more than 2 words, but we're going to call that 1 word, gratitude. And there's a lightness, but not like light opposite of gravity, but lightness like shining. Like I feel really bright. And I can only imagine it's because I'm in your company.
Oh, thank you so much. That's so lovely. And also we're in a purple room, so maybe
Yes.
Thank you, Nkechi. That's really nice. So yeah, love to hear more about you. So for anyone who's meeting you for the first time listening, who are you? What do you do? What is real for you right now?
Yeah, so I'm a multi-hyphenate in kind of my background, but also in what I do. So I am very vaguely a woman of color who currently lives in San Francisco, and I'm half Nigerian and half white Indian and West African on my mom's side. And I grew up in an all-Jewish neighborhood in a suburb of Minneapolis called Minnetonka. And I came out to California for college. And I sort of moved around, went to school in LA and then Scotland. And I've lived in various places and found myself in San Francisco. And I've been here for 9 years, which is kind of insane. And here I work in the spaces of where wellness and art intersect. So I'm very interested in beauty. I'm very interested in truth. I've always been interested in both. And I studied both in undergrad. I studied neuroscience and dance. And then I went to grad school, studied neuroscience, and danced professionally at the same time, which was rad. It was so amazing to be able to do both. And I was always just looking for a way to integrate the two. And I still am. I think it's evolved. But I'm currently art directing, making dances, wanting to incorporate dance in brand storytelling. And I'm also teaching mindfulness in various ways. So teaching public classes, corporate classes, conferences, retreats. I write about mindfulness. I do one-on-one stuff with people on mindfulness. It's so endless because it's really applicable to everything.
Totally. So you've lived all over the world, really. I mean, you've lived in Europe, you've lived in the States, and I don't know where Minneapolis is. Is it
the middle?
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
In the middle of the country.
So
in Minnesota.
Yeah, so you've got a pretty kind of good range of different locations. I'm curious if you could think back to each stage of your life when you were living in different places, like one takeaway maybe, or like one key learning that you took from each place or each stage of life.
Wow. Growing up in Minnesota, I would say the key takeaway is just stability and foundation. I always feel a sense of groundedness when I'm in Minnesota, even though I don't really identify that as truly home anymore. I'll be there next week for the holiday. And like holiday, it's not the holidays if it's like one, like for Thanksgiving, even though we don't celebrate Thanksgiving as a family. But that is where I will be next week. I always feel a sense of groundedness and rootedness in just the nature of like knowing where things are, knowing like that's where I come from. And all of my memories growing up as a child kind of are there. And I'm reminded of that. And all of like the things that made me me before I left are all in one place. College, I'd say. Okay, so where I went to school is in Claremont, California. So it's like an hour in between LA and like Palm Springs, so the desert. That opportunity, I would say, my takeaway was just perhaps anything is possible. And that as a woman, I can be anything that I want to be. So I went to an all-women's college called Scripps College. And I really think that was the environment I needed at the time. I definitely wasn't trying to go to an all-women's college. It just randomly happened. I had applied, and it was the best school that I got into. And I visited the campus, visited all these other schools, and visited that campus, and was just like, oh my God, I need to go here. Like, it's so beautiful. There's rose gardens and orange trees and lemon trees. The class sizes are super small, and I think I got the attention that I needed to really excel academically. And I also was super supported in me pursuing neuroscience, which actually wasn't an easy topic for me to pursue. I'm not really scientifically minded. I failed chemistry. Like, I really had a hard time. And I had so much support there. Also, one of my professors, Dr. Nicole Weeks, is a woman of color neuroscientist, and my first expander, maybe.
Yes.
I mean, not my first, but like definitely in the academic space, neuroscience space, like for sure, 100%. And of all the science classes I took, including chemistry, which I failed, I actually had to withdraw from the class because I was failing and I wanted to graduate with a neuroscience major. I got an A in her class, and I think like being able to see myself in someone else or see what's possible for me has allowed me to be a neuroscientist. And I ultimately decided not to be one. Sorry, this is a long-winded question.
Yeah, this is perfect.
Okay, so that was college. And then after college, grad school. So I went to the University of Edinburgh for a master's in neuroscience. And again, possibility and sort of worldliness, like this whole world that I can exist in that's like really open-ended, but also really feeling like confident in what I'm doing. Like, it's crazy. I had more confidence at 24 in grad school than I don't know, I wasn't 24. I was probably 23, maybe 22. Then I have like much later in life in my 30s. But just confidence. Like, I knew what I was doing. Like, I was very clear on my path, and then everything changed.
As it does.
Yeah, everything changed. So then I got a job as a neuroscientist in Palo Alto. So I moved out here for a couple of years, and then I decided to leave that job. It was really difficult for me, and for reasons, science industry is quite tough. Startup industry is quite tough. Being a woman of color in science, and probably even in startup culture, is tough. It was so long ago, and I was so young, and I really just wanted to be a neuroscientist, and this was like my dream job. Again, I think I probably, if I had written down what I wanted in a job, this was for sure it, and I was so excited about it, and there was nothing what I thought it was going to be. But I did learn in that job that mindfulness actually changes your brain and can heal you. So, truth, I guess, also too in that. And then I left and I moved to Minnesota for a couple of years, and mainly to be with my partner at the time. And if anything I learned during that period was ask and you shall receive. I was very much in an inquire place of like just wanting to know exactly what my purpose and what I was here to do, and like what am I called to, like who am I called to be, and like what is that going to look like. And my entire life completely like got turned upside down by just asking that question. But it was also super freeing. So that relationship ended, and I moved back out here. And then the last, 7 years I've been here, and I would say community has been the thing that I'm getting from San Francisco. I have a really solid community here. And magic.
Love it. Yeah, thank you so much. Mm-hmm. It's so nice to hear someone's journey just like described like that. So was the first time you heard about mindfulness during your neuroscience when you were a neuroscientist, or was it already on your radar by that point?
It was definitely kind of already on my radar. So I have an older sister, Dr. Nkechi Njaka, just published, she co-authored a book called Mixed Race in the US and UK, comparing the past, present, and future. And thank God I had an older sister, because she's super brainy, as you can tell, from just the very short introduction that I gave to you about her. But as a kid, we would always, we were like a very academic family. My father had a PhD in physics. His father was a professor. So just a family of that high value in education. And something that my older sister introduced me to was Loveline. I don't know if you've heard of Loveline, but it was hosted by Dr. Drew and Adam Carolla back in the 90s. And Dr. Drew is, he's a psychiatrist. And so he would have guests on the show. They'd call in and they'd have questions about, I guess, their love life. But he has this gift of being able to, like, what happened to you when you were 5? Or, like, what is your relationship like with your father? Like, he would just start decoding psychologically. Like, he would just know things about people. And I was like, I want that. I want to be able to do that for people, because I really saw healing in that. And I saw that people's lives were being changed by just having someone else see into them and their lives. And he could get there through behavior. And so I was interested in psychology. And then when I went to college, my sister was like, well, if you're interested in psychology, you might want to check out neuroscience. It's kind of like the science to psychology. And because she had already been in college for 4 years at that point. So I was like, okay, cool. I'm going to look into this. And then I've always really loved science. I just never was great at it. And I found neuroscience to be so fascinating. And I loved that the textbooks at the time, this is like 2000, 2001, textbooks were like, yeah, we don't really know what we're talking about.
Totally.
And I was like, yes, that's awesome. I can't be wrong then. Like, we're all still learning. And so I'd say my sister played a really large role in that. And dance was honestly default. I think that Scripps probably thought I was going to major in dance because I think I was recruited. Maybe, like, I think that I probably said I was interested in dance or something, or English, or I don't even know what I said in my application. But I remember having a conversation with my dance advisor and having her be like, wait, you're not majoring? I'm like, no, we'll see what happens. I'll just take a bunch of dance classes, and then it ended up being a minor.
But had you danced up until that point?
Oh my God, I've danced since age 3.
Oh,
yeah, I've
wow.
danced my entire life. And
tell us more about that.
yeah, dance is the most important thing, I would say, in my life. Mindfulness and dance. But I think when I think of the word mindfulness standalone, I think of like a sitting practice or like a slowing down and a stillness. And that's very much what I teach. And I think that there's something really honest and present about moving intuitively and listening to your body, which is like the skill that I got as a kid dancing. And what's cool about dance is that you have to see it first before you do it. So you have to watch someone else move their body in space, and then you try to copy it. And I think just having such a long relationship with that sort of learning has allowed me to be able to create the life that I want by just seeing people, imagining it, and believing in its possibility. That's one really applicable use of dance, but also this process of self-expression has always felt really important to me. And particularly when I got into high school, I started really having issues with anxiety and depression. And I think my first panic attack was when I was in an honors biology class. So like science and anxiety go really close together for me, not just personally, but also like what I ended up studying and researching. And I knew this thing would happen in science classes. Performance anxiety, I guess I'd call it now, but then that wouldn't happen when I was on stage. So there was this really big disconnect between one level of performance and another level of performance. And I really wanted to understand why I couldn't just tell my body not to do the things that they were doing when I was having a panic attack versus telling my body to do insane things like catapulting flips and like spinning around like 5 times, like crazy things. Like, how could I tell my body to do that? But how could I not tell my body to not do something else? Like, it just felt crazy to have the separation, and I really wanted to understand it, and so that's why I studied them both.
Wow. And like, so tell me why I can't control my body in this scenario?
I don't actually think I have the answer to that. I feel like, well, I don't know, I could be totally wrong, but my understanding of stress is that we have a very specific way in which we're conditioned to deal with what we perceive as threatening. And so all of my panic attacks are a product of repetitive perceived threat. And who knows when that started? That could have started at a young age. It could have started in honors biology. It could have started before I was born. Most likely several generations ago. Like, what feels stressful about me having to perform to a standard of academic excellence that I didn't feel like I could do? Like that, I think that's the root of where that anxiety was. And then it sort of bled into other areas of my life. I would get panic attacks when I would run into my very first love. Like blackout, like really bad panic attacks, like worse than I think than most cases of panic. So what was that really about? I mean, I think I can go back and look at like what are the things that I was afraid of in those moments. But I also think that it's hard to turn off or reprogram sort of an automatic system that is meant to support for survival. And the other one is just play. And there's a lot of freedom and spaciousness when it comes to play and not a lot of stress.
Yeah.
And so how I've been able to sort of merge the two is, I really do think mindfulness is an embodied practice of presence that is really rooted in our sensation of breath and our sensation in the body. And I think that creates the spaciousness of kind of reversing these systems that ultimately turn into panic, stress, to anxiety, to panic attack.
Totally. Yeah, that resonates with me so much. The other day at work, actually, I had an experience where I honestly feel like part of my brain shut down because I was so triggered. And it was only after the event where I could look back and say, oh, I actually didn't hear the rest of that conversation because of something that was said at the start. And obviously, you know, in the work I do, facilitating mindfulness classes, we teach that all the time, or we talk about the self-management piece and the taking a deep breath and the prefrontal cortex and bringing that all back online and all of that stuff. But it's so tough, like you said, because this is a survival instinct.
Yeah.
And it just still amazes me when it shows up. And now I'm trying to bring a bit more self-compassion in and be like, it's not about being perfect and never getting triggered or never kind of being in that state where your body is not listening to what you would want it to do optimally. It's just maybe having a bit more curiosity and compassion when that does happen, so that you don't spend the next 2 days worrying about the reaction that I had in that conversation. It's so fascinating. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Yeah. I mean, I think to your point, compassion, and often when I'm teaching in class and I am using, okay, like hold yourself in this practice with the lens of compassion, there's also the lens of inclusion and the lens of forgiveness and the lens of acceptance and allowing and the lens of even belonging to this part of you that is reacting in this way, and also belonging to the part of you that is so sweet and so sensitive and just needs space and to be held. And I think that actually offers us more space in those kind of situations rather than, I mean, if you think of like, well, it's interesting. Sometimes when I do practices around mindfulness of my thoughts, or even when I was doing the research as a neuroscientist and working with people with chronic pain would exacerbate with catastrophizing thought. So if you take that example, pull it away from maybe my catastrophizing thought, let's say in a science class. Chemistry, I remember this day so clearly. I had studied so much for this exam, and so much of my grade weighed on this exam, and I ended up blacking out. I thought I was going to throw up. I thought I was going to faint. I mean, there were so many things happening. And as they were happening, I was like, obviously, and so, like, normally, I mean, it's so normal and human to catastrophize, because I was like, okay, well, if I can't actually see the test, I can't complete, like, there was so much blocking the actual task of completing the exam, and I was like, well, then I'm going to fail the class, which is actually what happened. But I was like, I won't be, if I continue to be feeling sick, can't actually even read the words on this paper, I'm not going to be able to take this exam. If I don't take this exam, I'm going to not pass this class. If I don't pass this class, and I can't take the second semester of chemistry, and if I don't take either of them, then I'm not a neuroscience major, and if I'm not a neuroscience major, then what am I? And it was really, truly a catastrophe. Truly. And, you know, with a practice of mindfulness, perhaps at that time I might have been able to just see, well, it's not everything. Like, these things might happen. Maybe there's space to create or reimagine what a neuroscience major will be for you, which is ultimately what happened. I didn't complete chemistry, and I still majored with a neuroscience major and went to grad school for neuroscience and was a neuroscientist. So the catastrophizing thoughts made sense, but they weren't, like, true. They felt very real, but they were not true. And it's very hard to get to the truth in that state. And so, yeah, the more we practice that compassion or softness or acceptance of just like, yeah, this is a thing that happens, then the easier it is to kind of be like, okay, like that, like this is also part of this too.
Yeah, it's all
like
part of the experience.
Yeah,
I was thinking about that quote about anxiety being when your brain is in the future, and depression is when your brain is in the past or the present. Yeah. You know, it's all, and like, that's the amazing thing is, in my situation at work this week, if I'd have been able to get more present in my body, the chances are, like, it would have maybe deactivated some of the intense sensation I was feeling. But I almost, like, floated, like, above my body in a way.
Because it's so scary to be in your body sometimes when, like, things feel threatening. I mean, that's the whole point of that. That is the whole point, I think, of that mechanism within us that chooses fight or flight or freeze. I think it is meant for us to survive, but because of the society that we live in and the harshness of like our own judgments and the judgments of people around us, I think everything is a perceived threat, whether it's like a notification on your phone or like a long line or like, you know, the Uber cancels and like that's the threat because then I'm going to be late for this thing, and if I'm late for that thing, then I'm not going to get the job, or like I'm not gonna, like, my students will think that I'm like lazy and like unprofessional and they won't take me serious. Like, there's so many things, and then it's kind of like, well, do I really think that's true? Like, no. Okay, yeah, then it's not, and it's someone may, but like, does that really matter?
Exactly. I find the dance piece so interesting because it's probably only been in the last year that I've been really focusing on my body. And I think I shared with you before, I've been working with a sexual empowerment coach who's actually going to be on the podcast.
Can't wait. You'll love it. It's going to be so good.
And so she's been doing practices with me, one of which is free movement, basically dance. And I grew up as a musician, very drawn to playing piano and actually singing. But then because my voice wasn't maybe what I wanted it to be, I really kind of minimized that part of myself. And it's just so interesting to me because yesterday, after I had this difficult situation at work, I did some breath work, and then I just listened and said, like, what do I need? And my body was like, music. And so I played music, and then I was singing, and then the piece that came on was a piano piece that I'd never played before. It was like, do you know that it's Sampha? No one knows me like the piano.
No one.
Yeah. Yeah, you could probably sing it better than me. So then I went to the piano and like downloaded the music and played and sang and cried. And it was so cathartic. It really allowed me to release those emotions. And I've had similar experiences with dance, even though I consider myself to be quite mal-coordinated and not
we don't
a
need
dancer.
to be coordinated,
I know.
actually, to move. That's
right.
Well, I mean, and I'm saying that not just to say that to you, but actually when I teach mindful movement, so there is a movement class that I used to teach regularly, and then no one came to the class, so I stopped teaching it. I don't think people were ready for it, honestly, because I taught it at a yoga studio. People would show up with the yoga mat. I would tell them we're not using the mat. People would cry. Like, they were just uncomfortable with the lack of structure that I think yoga brings. But I think there's also a smallness in that. Like, so much of what we really need to be encouraged to do is to take up more space and to also be allowed to intuit and to move intuitively and to move expressively and emotively, which is why I love music too, because I think music is like one way. I was talking to someone about this morning. I was sharing that I had gone to a show the other night. I went to see Block Party, and
really wanted to go to that.
I didn't even know about it. And then a friend who's also half Nigerian, we were talking to another friend who's half Nigerian, and she was like, that's why I'm so excited to see Block Party on Wednesday. And I was like, yeah, Kayleigh, the Block Party is so important, and he's so important to me. And I was like, I'm going. I don't care how this happens. And I found tickets. But anyway, I was so happy at that show because I felt like he was fully embodied. There was a really full, true expression that was just moving through him that was so moving and so touching and so life-giving. And I was like, that is why the arts are important, because this experience is allowing all of us to feel something really real, not just feel, but also hear something really beautiful. And I mean, I can't, I really think that's like a quarter of heaven, like on earth, because it's true self-expression, and it's just incredible to me. And the arts are so important.
So important. It's so funny that you say that, because I literally had a very similar conversation last night, because we went to a gig this week for a friend. So it wasn't a band that I really know or love, the Black Keys.
Oh, I've heard them, yeah.
Yeah, and so I was kind of observing, just watching the musicians, and even though we were super far away because it was in the Chase Center, so it was like it was a lot for me. I was quite overwhelmed, but it was really fun. But I was watching like the drummer, and it's just amazing, as you say, watching someone so completely consumed by what they're doing, and it's so clearly their like life's passion. And I think one part of it for me is that envy of like, oh, I wish I had that thing that was my thing that I could excel at and just be completely in my element. But then it got me thinking of, well, yes, there's music, and yes, there's singing, yes, there's dance, but also how could that show up more just in this conversation or in how I live my life or how I do my work? Because I do think that many of us filter ourselves.
100%.
But when you see a band like Block Party, you're like, oh, there is no filtering, because it wouldn't resonate if they were filtering.
Well, I think you raise many good points there, because I think what's missing, again, this is another conversation I was having with somebody today, where we were just talking about kind of like the culture of San Francisco, and he's like, I don't even remember his question, but he just asked me something like, why do you think that is? And my answer was, I think people are sexually repressed. I think people have a really hard time self-expressing or know how to, and I think people are not embodied. Those were my three answers for why it's hard to connect with people, why it's hard for me personally to date. Those are all the things. Those are my three answers for everything. And I think to just even circle back to your point of feeling uncoordinated, that's not even the point. The point is just really being and feeling within your own body. That's the point. It's whether it's on beat or not, that could be interesting or not interesting. That's not that doesn't even matter. It's not, when I say dance, I'm not even thinking about dance technique, which I do have a background in, but that's not my interest. My interest is for people to exist in the body that they exist in expressively, because it's such a beautiful tool. And also in thinking about music, I mean, that's where I wanted my neuroscience studies to go. I was actually looking at PhD programs, one of them at McGill, where they like do all sorts of collecting of like neurobiological data while people watch performance. And I was really interested in that research for dance because I think dance is incredibly medicinal, not just in the practice of moving, but also in watching. I think there's a really tangible, intangible transference that happens when you watch people dance. And I don't know how to this is my next project, I guess, but I don't know how to bring that truth to everyone because it can happen anywhere. You can have that when you're on stage presenting or even when you're in a conference room. Like, how do you present with embodiment and not just, just kind of not even thinking about your body, but like, how can we all be more embodied? I think it would just make such a difference.
Oh, I couldn't agree more. I've been thinking about this so much, especially since working with my coach. Noticing where I'm not embodied, noticing where I am, what a difference it is. And I went to a class. I actually went to a dance class, which is very rare for me to say that.
Yeah, I was going to say, we should go to
one dance class that I've been to with Shona Charles.
Yeah, I just went to her class on Monday. I went to her chair class.
So I wanted to go on Monday evening at the assembly.
Yes.
Yeah, so I wanted to go to that.
We have all those cross paths
I know.
multiple times this week.
I know. but what was amazing to me about that experience was, again, it's kind of like those labels. So it was a sensual dance class. And I had such reservations about going, and which I shared with my friend, and she did too. And we both said, because we have reservations is why we should go. And we've both been working with this coach. So we kind of know, we know those signals, those feelings of, when there's like resistance, but also intrigue. And like, I wish I was the kind of person who went to a sensual dance class. And it's like, well, you can be, go. And so we did. And yeah, it was amazing when we did the hair routine because I really was caught up in watching her and being like, okay, so now I need to put my hand there and then I need to do this. And it was very, for someone who was trained as a musician, I consider myself to have good rhythm and good instincts and things like that. But it took me out of the feeling, the embodiment, and then I closed my eyes and like everything switched, because I was feeling the music and I was doing my own counts, and the routine wasn't even that difficult, right, to remember. And my body just kind of did it because it had already seen Shona do it. And it was just amazing that just closing my eyes allowed me to access that embodiment. And I felt sexy. I felt sensual. And then it's that question of how else can I use that sexual energy, sensual energy, in all parts of my life, which I think is so interesting.
Yeah, I love that you're saying this because it's something I think about too when I think about me being a person that's single and looking, to call in a partner, and how might I communicate my full self. I feel like the conversations around sexuality, sensuality are they still feel a little taboo to me. Even living here and being as progressive, as socially progressive as I am, and going to an all-women's school, I really feel even though I have a really strong foundation of why I believe what I believe in this particular space, it still doesn't feel like a conversation I'm having with a lot of people all the time, or even what to do about it, or even where to acknowledge when we might shut down or be small or whatever it is. And I think that, but it's also a cultural thing too. The conversation I was having this morning with this person of all of my theories about why San Francisco's odd, and I was trying to make a comparison to New York or London. There was a couple comparisons. One of them was that you're on the train in New York or London and you look at every single person on the train, nobody looks alike, whether it's their style, their hair, what they're wearing, their attitude. There's some kind of there's something that is being presented and put forth into a conversation that is not actually words. Here, San Francisco, I do not feel that at all. And it is so mysterious to me. It's what is the reason behind it feels like so much hiding. Like, everyone has an opinion. Everyone has a style. Everyone has an attitude. Like, everyone has something to project into the space that is public space, and nobody's doing it. So you just don't know where people stand. And that makes it really hard to attract people because you don't really know what's going on for them. And I don't know. It feels like a phenomenon to me. Like, I don't understand it. I'm trying to understand it so that I can, like, properly date someone. But even if I go out, I don't even know who's interested in me because it's just so protected, so guarded, so repressed.
Yeah. Do you think it's because everyone's afraid of judgment?
Collectively, though, that doesn't make any sense because it's the weirdest place. Like, people walk around naked. People walk around in costumes when it's not Halloween. Who is worried about judgment?
Yeah, maybe there are some people who are living it to the extreme.
Yeah.
But then there's the rest of us.
Yeah, that's like, okay, well, we have that. And like,
yeah.
I don't know. It's like, it's really bizarre because it's really not a conversation. It's a conversation I'm trying to have with more people.
Yeah. When I was doing the whole app thing, that's, I think, when I saw most strongly what you're talking about is, you see all these photos and a lot of people seem very, very similar. And I would go on these dates and maybe without being too harsh, I would get on the date and be like, oh my gosh, like how did I end up with this person? Because it's so clear that we're coming from completely different places. There was one conversation about feminism where the person was like, I'd mentioned feminism, and this was like not the first date, this was like 7th or 8th date.
Really?
And this is telling you a lot about my dating history, but he was just like, oh yeah, no, I don't agree with feminism. And I was like, well, tell me what you think feminism is. And he was like, oh, it's that like women think that they're better than men. I'm like, okay, no. But like my friend, who is very bright and very, very wise generally, was like, how has it got this far?
Yeah.
How does he not know this about you already, that like equity, equality is so important to you? So then I started looking at my own profile and I'd made it completely like anyone would like me, because I was just generic white, blonde at the time girl who didn't really say that much about herself other than she was British, which, generally here in California is a good thing. But it was interesting because I didn't want to be polarizing. I wanted everyone to like me, and in doing that, I would just meet people that wouldn't like me or I wouldn't like.
Right.
But it took me longer. So then I changed my profile to be like, at the time, vegan, feminist. I went really far, but it was sober. But it was good because it weeded
necessary.
A lot of people out.
Yeah.
But it was interesting to me to dive into like why I felt like I had to dilute myself.
Yeah. Well, I think that word of dilution is like actually quite important in this space here in San Francisco, particularly. I think it's less the case in Oakland.
Yes.
I can tell because people are just way more like, they're way more forthcoming about what it is that they need or want, which I think is actually truly an expression of who you are if you are able to be clear with what you need and what you want. And I almost think that like sometimes part of why it feels diluted here is because everything is changing all the time, that it's really hard to know why things are changing and like if it's personal. I mean, I don't know, I'm totally just making up shit, but like I kind of feel like the rate in which people change jobs, the rate in which people get in and out of relationships, the rate in which people move apartments for whatever reason, you're constantly having to renegotiate who you are. Yeah. I guess if you're trying to stay pretty neutral, and I feel like San Francisco attracts like liberal-leaning, more or less neutral people. Like no one's in conflict. Like in New York, you like bump into someone and it's a thing. Like, get out of my way, or like, what are you doing? Like, get off the sidewalk. Like people biking on the sidewalk, I feel like would not happen in New York. No one would stand for that.
No.
But here, people do not ever speak up.
Yes.
And if someone gets upset, then everyone is like, how do we diffuse? And it's like, conflict is actually a really important thing like truly when it comes to truth of who you are and like establishing community and even really in the foundation of love. this morning. I keep talking about this morning. I went to a talk, and the speaker, Kamal Mills, was talking about when we think about love, we think about like positive things, excitement, but like we often rarely talk about conflict, and that really landed for me because I'm having a lot of conflict in places where I love the people in the community, and I'm really trying to titrate between standing in my truth about what I think is wrong or what I think needs to be improved upon, and also just loving the people and also believing in a possible outcome that really serves everyone. It's tricky.
Yeah.
All of it.
Life.
Mm-hmm.
No, I couldn't agree more. And I think that is one of the things I love about mindfulness and my journey with it right now is, for me, it's not about sitting on a cushion alone in isolation. It is about relationships. It's about my body. It's about how I'm showing up in the world. And I'd love to hear your perspective. I know we've talked about this before, about the mindfulness space and how it can be very white. It is very white, and it can seem very male dominated. And I'd love to hear more about your experience that you've had since you kind of branched professionally into the mindfulness arena.
Yeah, I definitely felt like the only one my age and anyone that looked like me in the space of mindfulness. I still think that we're few and far between women of color who teach mindfulness specifically. I think there are a lot of people who teach meditation, a lot of people who teach yoga. And by people, I mean women of color or people of color that teach yoga and meditation. And I think mindfulness, for me, feels really important as an offering because of the ways that it connects you back to what's real and present in this moment. And it's really the opposite of evasion or escape or avoidance, which is very, very hard. And I think it's particularly hard with marginalized people, or people who are, I guess, all people, but people who are, I think it's hard for people who have to be in survival mode a lot of the time. And it's been challenging to be in a space that is like, has a really new market. I feel that the majority of people who teach mindfulness are at least 25 to 30 years older than me and have been doing it for a really long time. I kind of segregate mindfulness from Buddhism, which I feel like is not really what has been happening for years and years and years. I think that's pretty new, and it's new for me too. I mean, I'd still say the last 10 years is pretty new, but 10 years ago, if I said mindfulness, I don't think people knew what I was talking about. I don't even think I knew what I was talking about. And so it's evolved. I still really look like there's a lot of trends in meditation, and there's a lot of trends in wellness. And I think mindfulness is probably the least sexiest of all of the things anyone could be doing. Like, no one wants to sit with themselves. And no one wants to be there for any and everything that arises. And no one wants to, like, feel the discomfort of one's lethargy or exhaustion or aging body. Like, for me, it's like my joints, like, pre-arthritis. Like, I feel like it's not fun, actually. And I'm not pretending it's fun. Like, but it's important. I don't think brushing my teeth is fun either. I don't think doing the dishes is fun. I don't think vacuuming is fun, but it's important. And so it's really a practice of importance, and it's so not sexy. And I think, like, it's hard to build a career that is not based on anything sexy, or fun or cool or exciting. Like, I think that, again, like, those things are, like, what helps wellness. And I think, I don't know, and I think people traditionally had a lot of success in maybe even being those things, like, at the forefront. Like, well, I'm a sexy person. Like, I'm an exciting, interesting person to look at, therefore listen to me. And I think that needs to change. Like, and those things can be true, but the practice itself is not.
Definitely. Would you mind sharing with us any of your personal practice, what it might look like?
Yeah. So right now, my personal practice has been going to sleep at 10:30 every night, waking up without an alarm. And then when I wake up, I either sit in a mindfulness practice with no music, no sound, no prompt, or I journal, or I do a manifestation workshop. The Pathway, Lacey Phillips, I've been doing a lot of her work lately, and that kind of sits in the morning practice. And sometimes if I'm feeling really ambitious and I can do all of that stuff plus something else, I will go for a run, do some movement.
Sounds like a really nice morning.
Yeah, I don't like to schedule anything before 10 a.m.
So nice. So we already had the opportunity to talk all about our shared manifestation work, which was a great conversation. Halfway through, I was like, we should be recording this. But Nkechi and I both do, as Nkechi said, the Pathway from Lacey Phillips. So in the spirit of calling things in, is there anything you'd like to share with the world via this podcast of a manifestation you're working on?
Ooh. I'm really working on a way to build immersive mindfulness experiences that reach more people that include dance. And I've been experimenting with different models of what that can look like. And I'm excited about it. I'm excited to include dance more in the offering. And I'm looking forward to teaching more and to more people at a larger scale.
Amazing. And in the spirit of elevating others, I know you've actually mentioned a ton of people, which I really appreciate. Are there any expanders that you have in that kind of space that people might resonate with?
Yeah. I would say one of my expanders right now is Lauren Ash, founder of Black Girl and Own. Another expander is Mark Bamuchi Joseph. His title recently changed, and by recent I mean a year ago. He used to be the chief of performance and pedagogy at YBCA, and now he's the vice president of, I think, performance at the Kennedy Center in DC. He is definitely an expander for me. I have a list of them. I don't know why I'm blanking on them right now. But people that inspire me in my community are Kamel Mills, clearly today, and Lacey Phillips. Gosh, there's so many. I'm like,
Four is good.
Okay, yeah. I'm like, I feel like I might be forgetting someone.
Don't worry.
Like,
thank you so much.
Yeah.
So would love to, just to close out here, how people can get in touch with you, connect with you, find out more about you, because I'm sure people will.
Yeah, so my offerings are all on my website, which is www.ndnlifestylestudio.com. The best way to kind of keep up with what I'm like doing day to day is on Instagram, and my Instagram is ndnlifestylist. I'm occasionally on Twitter, but it's usually to complain about someone's lack of customer service. And as far as like public classes go, I teach mindfulness. It's called The Art of Presence on Fridays at the Assembly for San Francisco people. And that's at 1:30. And I also have an online sort of library of guided meditations on SoundCloud. So I guess if you search SoundCloud and Indian Lifestylist, there's maybe like 15 free guided meditations, varying lengths too.
Okay, we'll definitely link them because I also want to listen to them.
Yeah.
So that is awesome.
Yeah. I recorded them a long time ago, and actually something that I'm working on and hoping to manifest in 2020 is a meditation like album with a live musician. And yeah, it's part of the immersive experience, but I also definitely something. I mean, there's so many creative projects that I'm hoping that will kind of Bloom, that's one of them. I'll keep you
amazing.
posted.
Yeah. Oh my goodness.
Like that,
please.
my podcast.
Yes.
And like making a dance
so
film.
much good stuff. Love it.
Making meditation cushions and like what else do I want to do next year?
Well, you can do anything.
Yeah,
you can do anything. So, fine. Just to close out, something that Ryan Allen actually did for me, and this is totally optional. We took a deep breath, and then he just saw if there was any other message, anything else he wanted to like channel to the listeners. Yeah. Are you up for maybe trying it? Okay.
Yes.
Well, would you like to lead us in the breath this time?
Yeah, totally. So finding a comfortable way to be, maybe feeling both feet on the ground, lengthening the spine, allowing there to be space in the center of the body. We'll take 3 breaths together, drawing breath in through the nose. Exhaling breath out through the mouth. And again, drawing breath in through the nose. And exhaling breath out through the mouth. And one more time together, drawing breath in through the nose. And exhaling. My message is, if at any point in time that you have a hard time remembering who you are and what you came here to do, you always have the choice to come back to the breath and to the body and to find your truth and meeting yourself again.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
That was amazing. Big thank you, Nkechi.
Thank you.
It was amazing having you.